kicking off episode 435 of Manster Kid Radio with a song from the band The Intoxicos. They are a very, very cool surf band based out of Vila Velha, Brazil, and you can find them at intoxicos.bandcamp.com. Look for their album End Times and check it out. The song Paradise Stimulation, I really dig it, so that's what you're hearing right now. Of course, you'll hear it in its entirety at the end of the episode after we get through everything that we've got lined up for this episode of the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. I'm your writer, host, producer, Derek M. Cook. Welcome to the show. Now, if you follow Monster Kid Radio on YouTube, you've already seen the video that I released earlier this week announcing what 4 movies are going to be covered this month on the podcast. And that means you already know that this week, artist Jim Moore is joining me to talk about the 1959 film, The Manster. This movie, oh boy, this was a good one. And I had a great time chatting with Jim. Jim is somebody who I've wanted to have on the show for a while, and we talk a little bit about that when I have him on. And it's primarily my fault it didn't happen sooner, and I swear, man, we got to have you back on again sooner rather than later. I had a great time chatting with you. And the movie itself, man, it's good. And, I'm not going to spoil the conversation, but we are going to spoil the movie. I'm not the only person who's going to spoil it, though. Kenny has an amazing look at Famous Monsters of Filmland, and they spoiled the movie, too. So consider yourself warned. The movie's going to get spoiled twice. You know what else is coming up in this episode of Monster Kid Radio? We got a voicemail. We had a call-in from friend of the show, former guest of the show, Karen Joan Kohoutek. Karen is an amazing author, and she was just at the recent NecronomiCon Providence convention in, go figure, Providence, Rhode Island. And the NecronomiCon convention is all about Lovecraft and all of that great cosmic eldritch stuff. And she was there. So she called in to let us know a little bit about it. We'll be playing that voicemail here in a little bit. And speaking of voicemails, I've got a voicemail from somebody named Mark who responded to the contest that we had last month on the show in reference to the movie The Man Without a Body. Now, if you go back and listen to episode 431 of Monster Kid Radio, that's when I had author Micah Harris on the show. He and I talked about this film, and one of the highlights of the movie is that a dead historical figure's head is put on somebody else's body, and there's this weird Frankenstein-like thing going on. The contest that I was running was I was asking you to pitch to me a story involving a dead historical figure's head being put on somebody else's body and what that story would turn into. And Mark Spangler called in with this.
Hey, Derek. Listen, I love your show, and I'm calling up to enter your contest about the head on the famous historical figure. I love the program, by the way. So this one, I hope, fits the criteria of your contest. I was thinking of the Japanese monster Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster. I have 3 on the brain, so this is how it goes. In this imaginary film, which would have had to have been an AIP, 3 letters, production, shock rocker Marilyn Manson is hired to track down the ghost of the 5th President of the United States, President James Monroe. He tracks down the ghost to a mysterious island where a strange doctor is found to be creating the perfect head to be featured on the new $3 bill. Yes, it's the island of Marilyn Monroe. Keep up the good work. Bye-bye.
Okay, so first of all, that's just really cool. And second of all, Mark also sent me an email in which he gave me the top 10 reasons why he should be on Monster Kid Radio. I'm going to hold on to those until we actually do have him on the show, because the 10th reason that he gives me is that he seems to know a lot about a particular movie from 1958 that I have yet to talk about here on the show, and I would love to. So, you know what? I'm going to put this out there publicly. Mark, you and I are going to talk about that movie. We just got to line up a time. Anyway, I loved the voicemail. I'll be giving you a call here, and I'll get a copy of the sampler book that I was giving out at Monster Bash, which features one of my short stories and also some fiction from the aforementioned Micah Harris. You know, this introduction is going on a little bit longer than normal, and that's because I've got so much information to share with you. I actually just got a press release earlier this evening while I was working on this episode of the podcast, and I'm so excited that I can't wait. I need to share this with you right now from the press release Producer Aaron M. Lane is overseeing a new restoration of the first 3 of 10 episodes of the syndicated late-night horror-hosted show, Cinema Insomnia. It's slated to be released in retro-styled DVD packaging on September 17th from alphavideo/oldies.com. For $5.98, you can have one of these new, fun, colorful DVDs delivered to your door with wraparound disc art and special touches that will give you a case of the feels. Alpha's famously talented art department that pumped up many low-budget horror films back in the day with candy colors have made these DVDs look like they may have been a point-of-purchase Halloween buy at your mom's favorite discount store. Fans ordering directly from oldies.com will also receive a limited edition autographed postcard of horror host Mr. Lobo while supplies last. And that's just awesome. Okay, that was actually from me, not from the press release. The bottom line is, oldies.com is going to be putting out physical media celebrating Mr. Lobo, one of the hardest working horror hosts in the business today, one of the men behind OSI 74, somebody that I had on the show years ago when I went to my very first Monster Bash. The guy just, he's one of those guys. And what's really cool is that of the 3 releases coming out, only one of them is actually a horror-hosted movie program. Ega will be the movie that he covers, and that's the 3rd release. The first 2 releases are actually specials that he produced, and they still have that cool horror host charm. The first one is the Haunted House special that Cinema Insomnia put out, and I've actually seen this. It was available on Roku, probably through OSI 74, but I have seen it, and it's pretty cool. It's Mr. Lobo, it's Count Gordeval, it's Carlos Borloff, and Dr. Sarcophagi, and Svengoolie, all getting together to tell a haunted house spooky story. The second release, it's a Bob Wilkins Halloween special. If you don't know who Bob Wilkins is, well, let me tell you, Bob Wilkins is a man behind the iconic Creature Features program from back in the day. Yeah, other people have picked it up since then, and, it's awesome, but Bob Wilkins was the first, and he was the man. And bonus, as soon as I got this message from Mr. Lobo about these releases, I reached out to him, and we're trying to figure out a time to get him on the show to talk briefly about it, so stay tuned. This all happened after I put out that YouTube video announcing what's happening this month, but, things change, and if we can get Mr. Lobo in the mix, well, it's all the better. Anyway, I've been rambling a lot. Why don't we get into the meat of the episode where we talk about the Manster with Jim Moore and everything else right after this.
A young bride packing for her honeymoon. What happens to her now may be all in the mind, a figment of her imagination. Or she may be in very real danger. Either way, there will be madness and murder and fear in the night.
Mrs. Beamish tells me you haven't been very well lately. You had a nervous breakdown.
That was about 6 months ago.
These things take a long time to sort out.
He was waiting for me, Bob, like he was before.
Fetch the doctor.
No, God, please. Bob, I was attacked. I was. You don't believe me, do you?
I believe you think you were attacked. A honeymoon at a quiet school in the country. A school without pupils. Just deserted halls, empty rooms, and fear in the night.
If somebody asked you to describe a movie to them, what would you say? Would you say that Guardians of the Galaxy is Star Wars meets the A-Team, or that Jurassic Park is Westworld meets the Lost World? The X meets Y pitch is a long-standing Hollywood tradition, one that's been used to sell plenty of movies that otherwise probably wouldn't have been made. But instead of starting with a script and comparing it to 2 movie titles for an X meets Y pitch, what if we started with 2 movie titles and improvised the pitch? Well, on my podcast X Meets Y, that's exactly what we do. I'm Jonathan Inbody, and each episode I and a guest will randomly select 2 movie titles, and then we have half an hour to come up with a new original movie idea that could be described as Movie X meets Movie Y. We've done episodes like Ocean's 11 meets 2001: A Space Odyssey, Godzilla meets Old Yeller, and RoboCop meets Dead Poet Society. Basically, it's a half-hour sprint through a brainstorming session, and it is a lot of fun. If any of that sounds even the slightest bit fun to you, then you should give X Meets Y a listen. It's available wherever you find your podcasts, or at xmeetsy.libsyn.com. Hopefully, you'll hear my voice again very soon, but for now, enjoy the rest of your regularly scheduled podcast, you lucky so-and-so.
Your attention, please. During every suspenseful moment of the running of the motion picture Macabre, the life of everyone in this theater will be insured by Lloyd's of London for $1,000 against death by fright. However, even Lloyd's of London will not grant coverage for any person with a known condition or for suicide by any member of the audience.
No, what has he done, Polly? Tell me. Go on.
She's not dead. Not yet. But she's in a good, big coffin for her.
Don't worry about being scared to death. Your heirs will collect after you've gone.
Where is she? Where is she? I can hear her breathing. Where is she?
Bring someone with you to see this motion picture. You'll want some live hands to hold during the performance. And you won't want to go home alone after it's finished, if you're able to go home. And we won't worry about your telling anybody the ending of this picture, because you may not be around to tell. These are the living members of its cast. If you meet any of them in a dark alley, we advise you to scream for help, if it's not too late to scream.
Derek and everyone in Manster Kid Radio Land. This is Karen Joan Kohoutek. I just wanted to drop a little report on this year's NecronomiCon Providence, which was just held a week ago, and we should have organized some sort of Monster Kid Radio meetup, because there were several people there, I'm sure plenty of people that I missed, who have been guests on the show, and lots of topics of interest. Night Gallery came up a lot, which is kind of strange. I saw a panel with both Brian Callahan and Oren Gray, who were on it, and I had a chance to meet and talk briefly with Kenneth Haidt. And I'd say the biggest, most important thing was I got to spend some time with Monster Kid's friend, Alan Trump. We were able to have dinner together, and we discussed everything from the Devil Bat to Monstroid and all points in between. I also wanted to mention a book I picked up, which I think your listeners, it's all the same, would like to know about. It was a book that debuted there from Muzzleland Press, Muzzleland, which is called Behold the Undead of Dracula, Lurid Tales of Cinematic Gothic Horror. And it is all new stories that are inspired by Hammer horror films, which I immediately, of course, who doesn't need to get that? And I've read about half of them so far, and all of them have been excellent. So I thought the Hammer films, that should definitely be something that your readers might see. Your readers, your listeners, you are everything, Derek. I hope you all have a great day. Maybe we'll see you 2 years from now at NecronomiCon. Or I'll get down to a Monster Bash. Talk to you later. Bye.
Karen, thank you for calling in and letting us know how NecronomiCon went. One of these years, I'm going to get out there. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I'd really like to get out to Rhode Island and just visit the area that Lovecraft lived in, what informed his fiction so much. And, It's always great to hang out with fellow Lovecraft and Weird Tales fans. You mentioned a number of Monster Kid Radio. You know what? We're going to call them alumni at this point. Monster Kid Radio alumni that were actually out there as well. I think it's awesome you got to sit down and have dinner with Alan. Alan is just awesome. Alan and I, really good friends, and our relationship goes way back. Ask him about the time that he wrote a screenplay for a low budget movie that I appeared in. Just ask him about that. Anyway, there was one other person that you didn't mention. Somebody else who was kind of sort of there, who was a Monster Kid Radio regular, alumni, irregular. Dominique Lamses. No, she wasn't actually there at the convention, but she does have a story in the book you mentioned, Behold the Undead of Dracula. Dominique's a dear friend. However, even if I wasn't friends with Dominique, I'd still tell you, she has one of the most unique, underpraised voices when it comes to gothic and weird tales today. So, if nothing else, listeners, I recommend picking up Behold the Undead of Dracula just for Dominique's story, which is called Vengeance of the Blood Princess. I looked at the titles of the other stories in the book, which actually is not available for general release at this point, so good on you, Karen, for picking up a pre-release copy. But some of these other titles look awesome, including Taste of Fear in the Night. A Taste of Fear in the Night, that's just awesome. Anyway, looking forward to the book. Karen, thanks for calling that in. And you know what? We need to talk. We need to get you back on the show at some point. And, speaking of books and Karen, and it is getting closer and closer to Halloween, highly recommend the book, The Jack-o'-lantern Box. It's a wonderful Halloween tale. I've read it twice so far, and I love it. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes so you can pick up your own copy. Thanks for calling in, Karen.
There it is, the barrier. All those men in that satellite will die.
Yet you propose to follow this 10th failure with another attempt, using more of your volunteers?
The future come to life today. The fantastic story of Project Sigma, Earth's first manned satellite for the invasion of outer space. Monstrous space rockets propelled at the speed of light through the solar system and the galaxies, joining in the cosmos to travel to worlds beyond. War of the satellites. From unseen, unknown planets comes a warning of horror that the United Nations cannot ignore.
We are obviously in the grip of a force stronger than we can oppose.
The invasion of Earth by a race of supermen from outer space, possessing the weird power of duplicating themselves indefinitely. Creatures taking on human form, yet impervious to any destructive force known to man.
Look out!
The terrors of space travel. The first death and burial in the cosmic void, millions of miles away. An insidious enemy on board, trying to stop man from reaching beyond the limits of our own solar system.
Sigma barrier dead ahead. Crash emergency. All hands secure for blast.
Vampires, werewolves, zombies.
Yes, these things are real, but fortunately for those of us who can afford him, so is Mark Temple.
And he's good. Real good. He's a former FBI agent turned freelancer with the knowledge and skills to eliminate your monster problems. And his rates are negotiable.
Monster Hunter for Hire, the first volume of the Supernatural Solutions, the Mark Temple Case Files, is now available in both ebook and paperback. Go to tinyurl.com/monsterhuntertemple to buy your copy of Derek M. Cook's latest book.
Read about Mark Temple, the experienced professional now available to rid you of your supernatural, ghoulish, and monstrous pests.
That's tinyurl.com/monsterhuntertemple.
And don't worry, Mark Temple is discreet.
M1 to CK. Docking maneuver completed. Link up accomplished successfully. Starting rocket motors to continue flight. Over and out. Next step, Mars. 35 million miles away.
Mission Mars. 3 astronauts on a mission to the forbidden reaches of the Red Planet, defying the elements, inviting death and disaster. Darren McGavin, who gambled his life on a fantastic mission to a world no other living man had ever seen.
Oh, darling, I'm so scared.
Nick Adams, who shared the incredible odyssey, living an adventure beyond his wildest dreams. Mission Mars.
What the hell is that?
They met their destiny on a planet that time forgot. An adventure that smashes the barriers of man's imagination.
Watch out, the ball is opening! Help me!
Mission Mars.
This is Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned. And don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. This week's movie, The Manster, was featured in Famous Monsters number 28. The article is 4 pages long and includes 7 photos. It is reprinted in FM 114, the famous Kaiju issue. This is more a photo preview than a text article. Here's what little it had to say about the movie. Japanese Dr. Suzuki unfortunately has a deranged brain. Otherwise, his experiments might not be so abnormal. He even experiments on his own brother. He even subjects his wife to the horrors of his sinister serum. And what does his evil injection do? First of all, it reduces his own flesh and blood brother to a mindless creature, half beast, half human. And his wife, she is turned into a horrible thing with hairy hands, sharp fingernails, protruding teeth, eyes awry. She is so awful to look at and so dangerous that she must be kept behind bars in Suzuki's laboratory. Larry Stanford, a young reporter, gets wind of a scoop and visits the mad experimenter's laboratory, hoping to discover and report to the world what is going on there. He finds out in the most direct and unpleasant of all possible manners, by himself being transformed into a monster. After the serum has been injected into his bloodstream, a human eye begins to grow on his shoulder. Soon it is followed by other distorted human features until an entire second head has grown side by side with his original head. The effects of the serum and the horrible extra head send Stanford insane, and he becomes a mad killer. Time and again he attacks, murdering right and left. The city is terrorized. No citizen is safe. He must be stopped. American science fiction author Walt Sheldon wrote the screenplay, based on the story aptly titled Nightmare. That is all for this week's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland. This is Kenny for MKR. We'll be back with more next week. Adios.
Monster Kid Radio listeners, sometimes I reach out to somebody or somebody reaches out to me and we talk about getting them on the show to talk about something and we go back and forth on Facebook or by email, and then a year goes by, and we finally get together and get him on the show. I'm talking about this week's guest, Jim Moore. Jim, how you doing, man?
Hi, Derek. Good to be here. Good to talk to you. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I love your work. Now, Jim is an artist, and I love everything that you've posted online. Makes me incredibly jealous.
Thank you.
That I don't have the same skill level that you do, but I'm so thankful that you get to share that with people and such. How long have you been involved with art?
Well, pretty much my whole life. As long as I can remember, I've picked up Play-Doh and been drawing, and my subject was always monsters. I can't think of a time when there was anything I would rather do. So things just kind of like moved along, and just as a hobby. And then about 25 years ago, I got a job at Halloween making masks, which is a hobby that I did. So I got, I was professionally employed at it for a good 10, 15, about 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So I did that, and I kind of honed it a little bit better, and my skills in making molds and things like that, and, principles of color theory and, what looks good and how, and, anatomy and stuff like that kind of improves a little bit. That job ended. China, it's production thing. So, yeah, I picked up ceramics. I used to work in latex and had access to a kiln. And it's a lot of the same principles. Doing rubber, I'm a small fish in a big pond, and doing ceramics, I'm kind of the only game in town. I mean, there's tiki ceramists out there, but none who are doing quite what I'm doing. So that's my theory in tackling the format that I'm using.
I'm looking at your website as we're chatting over at moremonsters.wixsite.com. I'll make sure there's links in the show notes for all this, including your Etsy shop. And I'm looking at all of this, and it's all gorgeous, of course. I mean, it's wonderful stuff here. But I also see a lot of Creature from the Black Lagoon representation and influence, so I think we're going to get along fine.
Oh, no. He is my all-time favorite monster. Monsters come and go, but he is the guy that took me. It's one of the first cinematic images I ever remember was the scene from Revenge after he's escaped from Marineland, and he's storming across the beach, and he tips over that car, and he works his way into the ocean. That image, and I didn't even know what it was for a long time in my head, because I just remember that, and then eventually, as a little child, I worked it out. So, yeah, the creature was in there.
Wow.
He's my favorite monster, and he's my also most popular since I've been doing this thing.
I do like your take on it. I do like your take and your style. There's a definite style here that I'm seeing in a lot of your pieces, whether it's the posing or something you did with the face and the eyes. This is all really cool. And I'm sitting here looking at, you got a golem, you've got a Gill-Man, you got an alien on your website. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
This is great.
Thank you. Well, I enjoy doing this thing, and it is largely a labor of love. I have a day job, and, I'm happy to get my stuff out there. I'm happy that people are enjoying it. I'm really, really stoked on it. And I'm going to be at the Monsterpalooza in September, and I realize the show probably won't drop until after that, but it's in Burbank, California, and it's twice a year if you're ever down in Southern California during, it's usually April and September. You should go to Monsterpalooza because it's got a lot of neat monster stuff.
It's on my list. I've been told repeatedly that I need to get down there, and just one of these days, man, I will. We got to get that Monster Kid Radio tour bus up and running, and then I can just go, coast to coast hitting all the cons.
The dream.
Stay tuned for the next GoFundMe project. No, I'm just
Hey,
yeah, Monsterpalooza is what, mid-September this year. It's September 13th through 15th.
Yes.
And this episode will probably come out the week before that. So, listeners, if you're going to be at Monsterpalooza, look up Jim. Are you going to have a table this year?
Fantastic. Yes, I have a table this year. This is probably I think this is the fifth one I've done. I've attended just as a fan. I think all of them going back to around 2004, maybe. But yes, I will have a table. More monsters. I think it's 36. I think I'm space 36. But regardless, I'm the only more monsters there. And I think I'm on a corner. So, yeah, if any listeners want to come up and say hi, please do so.
Yeah. Let them know that you heard him here on Monster Kid Radio and check out his artwork. It's good stuff.
Definitely.
Now, I like to ask this of the different artists that I have on the show, and I'm going to ask you too. What is it about loving monsters that pushes people into wanting to create their own? You see so many people doing masks and paintings and drawings and novels and all this other kind of work when they love the monsters, when they're a monster kid. You don't see that nearly as much with the other genres of film. Why do you think that is? Do you have any idea as to why you were drawn or pushed to do this?
Well, I think the images of the creatures are so iconic. You got like Frankenstein. Everyone in the world, knows that image. And whatever, other genres of films there are, there's nothing that has quite that much to grab onto and is that dynamic. The monsters are just they're just so cool. It's really hard to really pin it down. And if you have the interest in it and you have the abilities, that someone like I do, it just seems like a natural marriage, a natural combination of things. I've been a mask maker and known mask makers, and there's just this driving thing. It's also, if you are a mask maker, it's also, part of the fun is to actually be the monster.
I've worn a lot of makeup and masks and all that, and that stuff gets hot and uncomfortable, and yeah, I don't miss it. I haven't done the big Halloween makeup in years, and I don't miss it.
Yeah, it's like I still will collect masks. I still, I will maybe wear them on Halloween, but they go up on the shelf. I've got a whole attic full of latex, not only ones that I made, but ones sometimes, I'll see something and it's like, oh, this is just beautiful stuff. There's one company, Zagoni, they're out of, I think, Chicago, and they just make wonderful stuff. It's not licensed stuff, but it's just beautiful stuff. They treat their latex right. It's really nice stuff, and it's like, even though it's like, well, do I really need this? No, but man, I love this. And again, it looks great up on the shelf, and just admiring it. So, you don't necessarily have to. And, Halloween's right around the corner. I think a lot of those places already have their stuff out, don't they?
Yeah, and I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
Once October 31st rolls or November 1st rolls around, I have a hard time accepting the fact that it's over. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to truly end, honestly.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And that's why you do your show, I'm sure, right?
It's a big part of it. I love this stuff so much, and I love chatting with people who love it as well. And we're going to talk about a movie that is definitely a Monster Kid style movie. It's got all the great hallmarks of a good monster movie from this era. And we're going to get into that. But Jim, you've listened to the show. You know what's coming up here, right? We've got to play a game.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got a game that we play here on the show called the Classic Five. I've got a deck of cards here, and each one of these cards has a this or that, which movie do you prefer style question. There are no wrong answers. It's basically just a conversation starter. And while I really doubt we'd have a hard time finding something to talk about, let's go ahead and play around anyway. You ready to play the Classic Five?
Let's do it.
All right, card number 1. Which movie do you prefer? The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad or Jason and the Argonauts?
That is crazy that you just said that, because just the other day I popped in Jason and the Argonauts because it had been a while since I'd seen it. And I actually did watch The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad on the 4th of July on my brother-in-law's big screen outside. And he's got like this projection thing. I watched Seventh Voyage. I love Seventh Voyage, but Jason and the Argonauts hit me first. And a lot of times with these things, the ones that hit you first are the ones that really, really resonate. And, oh my God, the Hydra, the skeletons, Talos, there's so much there to love, so I've got to go Jason.
Now, from the makers of Sinbad, Columbia Pictures presents Jason and the Argonauts. The mightiest band of warriors the world has ever known.
Turn back, Jason! We're trapped!
Sailing to the ends of the earth, battling against an incredible number of obstacles.
Where will you find this miracle? I have heard there is a tree at the end of the world, with a fleece of gold hanging in its branches.
In search of the fabulous magic golden fleece, Jason and the Argonauts, caught in the clutches of the towering bronze giant Talos, battered by treacherous falling rocks, taming vulturous harpies, facing the dreaded seven-headed Hydra.
I think a lot of times it's which one you saw first, which one made the imprinting first. So yeah, totally get it.
Edges it out. I mean, honestly, it's like I love Seventh Voyage. And my next piece is Cyclops from Seventh Voyage.
Oh, wow.
Which you will be seeing shortly. But yeah, my next mug is going to be Cyclops.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, card number 2. John Agar or Nick Adams?
John Agar. He was in so many more. I mean, Nick Adams is cool. He did some great Japanese stuff, and he did the one with Boris Karloff. But John Agar was in so many great things. I just watched Tarantula and The Mole People. And, he was in King Kong, which was, it was a small part.
Oh, yeah, but he's there. He's there.
He's there.
Yeah.
It was cool to see him, because I knew him, who he was at that time. I knew his name, and I didn't necessarily recognize him because he was older, but I remember in Famous Monsters seeing, it's like, oh, yeah, John Agar. He was in Revenge of the Creature. So, yeah, I got to go John Agar.
Yeah, I love Nick Adams. I wish there was more Nick Adams out there, but yeah. my man John.
It probably has to do with just kind of also just kind of more familiarity. Nick Adams is, like I said, he was in a few things, but John Yeager was in more close to a plethora of awesome stuff.
Yeah. All right, card number 3. Who's your favorite horror host?
Oh, well, I have to go with my childhood horror host who was named Seymour. He was Sinister Seymour. He was out of Los Angeles. He was on KTLA Channel 5. I'm in San Diego, but I got all the LA stations. He was my man. He was Larry Vincent. He was a classic horror host. He came out. He did jokes. He showed all the movies. I remember seeing Bride of Frankenstein, all that stuff. And he was my man. He was funny, and he was on twice a week, and then he eventually got syndicated over down to Channel 6 down here. But eventually Elvira took over. But Seymour was, again, the ones that hit you first are the ones that hit you hardest. So
sure.
Yeah, he's my man.
Sure. Right on. Very cool. I don't think I've ever seen anything, but do you know if any of his footage or his shows exist now?
That's the thing about those old horror host shows. They never had any intention of these things preserving, so I think they probably just taped over them like a lot of the old TV shows. I mean, there's stills, and I think there's like one promo he did for like Not Scary Farm back in the 70s. But yeah, no, he's kind of lost some time, so you had to be there. But that's just part of the whole nostalgia thing, A lot of it exists in your memories.
Yeah. All right, card number 4. It is from our Hammer Films expansion. Peter Cushing as Van Helsing or Peter Cushing as Frankenstein?
There's a thing about him where I like him better as a good guy than a bad guy. And I know a lot of his, kind of Hallmark stuff, he played a villain, but with the dichotomy between him and Christopher Lee, I always saw Christopher Lee as the bad guy and Cushing as the good guy, so I have to go Van Helsing.
Interesting.
Yeah, because he's a grandfatherly type. He seemed like a good, warm person, and whereas Lee seemed like a very cold, kind of put offish person. So I think I prefer to see Peter Cushing in the Van Helsing role because it's a gallant role. It's a heroic role.
All right, and the final card. If you could have visited the set of any classic monster movie during its production, which one would it be?
I would say King Kong. Because I know that they had some amazing sets.
We're talking the original, right?
Where they built. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you brought up the other one earlier, so I wanted to make sure.
I did bring up the other one, and I do love the other one. But I'm talking about 1933.
Okay.
The locations where they built the wall and everything. Yeah, I have to go King Kong. It's just a magical movie. It's a movie that had everything, and I can't imagine that it was all miniatures. I'm sure there were some amazing things to see live on the set.
I think sometimes when we watch King Kong, we get, and rightly so, overwhelmed by the stop motion by Willis O'Brien and all of that. But there is a lot of amazing set work there. That set design, and we get to see it more in, The Most Dangerous Game. The same sets and all that were used, and it's just gorgeous. And that was a time and place in Hollywood where they were making these things full size. So you could get lost in it. Just amazing.
Yeah, I love artificial environments. I know they don't always look real, but they look really cool. And actually, there's one really good one early in The Manster. So, there's a segue.
There we go. Yeah, I didn't have to do it this time. All right. Well, that was the Classic 5. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and talk about The Manster, which is a film that I am not overly familiar with. In fact, I don't know if I'd ever seen it before today. This, or at least not all of it. Now, I know I've seen clips, especially in the 90s. I saw clips because there were a lot of comparisons made between Army of Darkness and this film. And I remember somebody bringing that up, and then it's like, well, okay, now I got to know, because I loved Army of Darkness when it first came out. So I did go back and check it. But to sit down and watch it start to finish, dedicated viewing, this was the first time, and I was pretty blown away by what I saw on screen. This was pretty darn cool.
Larry!
From the exotic geisha houses of Tokyo to the back alleys of the Ginza Strip comes the terrifying news of a fiendish creature that threatens to destroy all who stand in his way. This is the frightening story of an American reporter in Tokyo who unwittingly became the victim of a shocking scientific experiment that turned him into a horrible mutant, half man, half monster, the Manster.
way.
I think I know where he's going, to Taras. Follow me.
Right.
There's panic in the streets as the unheard-of terror of a half-man, half-monster runs wild through the city.
There he goes!
Don't miss The Manster, a genuine thriller in the most frightening sense of the word.
My history with it, it's pretty similar. I was familiar with it from the old, do you know the Dennis Gifford book?
Oh, yeah.
The pictorial history of horror movies.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of my first acquisitions. And that's when I was a kid, where I realized, wow, this can exist. And it started me on collecting books and magazines.
Right on.
But there was a still from The Manster, and it's just the guy with the two heads. I was, intrigued by that, but it was never on. And you're kind of a slave to whatever your local, 13 channels back then broadcast.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it was just never on. That was the extent of it for me, and it's like, oh, The Manster. For some reason in my head, I always got it confused with The Brainiac.
Oh.
I don't know why. So I thought The Manster was a Mexican movie. When you're a kid, you just make these weird associations. And then I picked up a Mill Creek set, those 50 horror movies to curdle your blood, public domain.
I think all of us have at least 3 Mill Creek sets in our collection.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I picked one of those up just relatively recently. This was last year at a swap meet. And, I was going through them. It's like, yeah. And this one really stood out to me. It was like, you know what? This is actually really solid. It actually does. It hits all the notes that a classic vintage 50s monster movie does. And
sure.
So, yeah, it was really... Yeah, I was really pretty impressed.
In fact, if this movie had been made like 10 years prior, I could have seen Lon Chaney Jr. in the lead role.
Absolutely. And again, there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of parallels with our hero and Chaney Jr.
Oh yeah. So it is in the public domain. It turns up in a lot of places. And, growing up, like you said, sometimes you're kind of restricted by what's going to show up on Showtime or the local TV station's going to show or whatever. Today, we are so fortunate, but sometimes I feel like we get analysis paralysis. At least I know I do. I've got over 100 channels on my Roku. And I'm always going through trying to figure out,
overwhelming.
Yeah, what am I going to watch? They all show the same thing, but, each one's a little different. Maybe somebody's going to have something else, but, so I guess what I'm getting at is this is an easy one to get your hands on at this point, and I'm glad for that because it is so interesting. The production, like I said, I don't know a lot about it, but my understanding is that it's an English production. It's an American film, but they shot it in Japan. They went over to Japan to shoot. Is that right?
Yes, from what I can tell, it has a mostly Japanese crew, and it obviously takes place in Japan.
Yeah, our lead is American, but one of our other leads is not. He is Japanese, or at least Japanese-American. He can speak pretty well English. Listen, I can't.
You need subtitles, guys.
Yeah, I think so. Even though we're in Japan, the primary Japanese characters that we meet do speak English rather well as well. So we don't have that kind of stilted pidgin English kind of thing going on, which I'm very grateful for. There's no, I don't know where I'm going with this.
There's the stereotypes, the Charlie Chan
That's
stuff.
the word. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's treated pretty respectfully, especially considering that, World War II was not that distant of a memory, and they could have been a little more brutal on it, but they actually treated it with pretty good respect. I think they were being treated probably pretty well by their crew that was putting this movie together. I think they worked together pretty well, and I think it showed in the characters.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And our lead actor, our American lead, our viewpoint character, I guess, for the film, is played by Peter, and is it Dineley or Dineley? I'm not sure on the pronunciation of the last name. And he's actually British.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's actually British. He actually did one of the voices in the Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds, I did see that, yes. Huh.
Yeah, he plays our American reporter, pulling a little bit of Steve Martin, a la Perry Mason, perhaps. I don't know, or
well, it's a little more substantial than that. It's not just
I know.
He's a through line. Yeah,
I'm not trying to imply that this movie's got a bunch of Japanese stuff that we just inserted some American footage in. This is one production. There's no Japanese version versus American version or any of that. I'm not implying that at all.
There's not one where King Kong wins, and there's not one that Godzilla wins.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think people are going to be so disappointed when they, to sidetrack, are going to be so disappointed when that Criterion Blu-ray set comes out and we finally see the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla and the ending is virtually the same.
Our urban myths, our legends and fairy tales have done us wrong.
Yeah, I think I blame Forrest Ackerman for that. I think that's who kind of...
Well, he spoke in puns. He wasn't meant to be taken literally.
Exactly. Anyway, so he plays Larry, our reporter, our globe-trotting reporter. He's got a wife
underpaid.
Underpaid.
Criminally underpaid, yes. He made sure to mention that.
He's got a wife back in New York, and he's looking forward to wrapping up this final story, and he's going to go back to New York and settle down there. He's tired doing this hopping around the world, getting all these stories. He wants to be a husband at home, present in his wife's life.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Living the American dream, the kids and the white picket fence.
But he's got one more story to do. And that's what brings him into, just one more job. Just one more. Yeah, he's got one more story to do, and that brings him into the world of Dr. Suzuki, played by Tetsu Nakamura, who's great.
Dr. Robert Suzuki, his little looks over at Larry after he did what he did are just so, just sublimely fiendish.
Oh, it's great.
He just had some great little cut-ins where he was just kind of like, heh, heh, heh.
I love a good mad scientist film. I really do.
Oh, yeah.
This guy's doing some mad scientist stuff without being overly mad. And I loved it.
Yes.
The little looks, I mean, it's just great.
Exactly, yeah. He was not a fiend. He actually was doing this stuff for science. He seemed to really care about what he was doing. He did go over the line like so many. He was not Dr. Moreau. He touched on stuff like that, but it wasn't complete hand-wringing, maniacal mad scientist. He actually seemed to really care about mutation and evolution and cosmic rays and advancing the species.
Really interesting take, and even later on in the film, we find out that the two subjects that we meet at the beginning of the movie that have been transformed, mutated, deformed, or whatever, weren't necessarily a result of something he did to them.
Yeah.
They kind of volunteered. And when we learn that kind of even adds a different level to what's going on here.
It does. It makes you wonder almost might want to see a prequel to understand why his wife and his brother would be so willing to undergo this, what turns out into a transformation in the name of science. Yeah, they are. They do seem to be voluntarily what they become.
I'm not 100% clear on what he's trying to do. He's trying to do something with evolution. He wants to use chemicals to do what the cosmic race did. I'm still not 100% clear on the science. It felt a little wonky, but we don't watch these movies for, solid science lessons.
Have to go with it.
But he does see a great subject in Larry the reporter, offers him a drink, and gives him a drug.
Oh, yeah. The bottle behind the other bottle, the secret bottle. He always makes sure to put it back and then bring it out again and make sure it is in its spot. And, he slips him a Mickey, doesn't he?
Basically. Knocks him out, does what he's going to do to him. And
he injects him with a syringe.
Yeah.
Right in the shoulder.
Which is important because the shoulder area is something that he's going to keep coming back to over and over and over again, which I really enjoyed. And listeners, if you have seen Army of Darkness, you are going to see so many parallels here. I can't believe that Sam Raimi didn't pull influence here from this. I almost feel like it was pulled off more successfully in this than in Army of Darkness. Just, I don't know if that's blasphemy to say so, but man, it worked really well on this.
Oh yeah, it did. And it's strange. I never made that connection until I was looking at IMDb, and I'm all, oh yeah, I can totally see that with what happened to Ash. Yeah. I'm sure Sam Raimi, he's a fan. I'm sure he saw this as a kid. He probably saw it in well, maybe not in the theater, but I'm sure he saw it probably on TV there.
Sure. Well, and at some point, I mean, Army of Darkness is the third film in the Evil Dead trilogy. You know what? Totally irrelevant. As far as the Manster goes,
okay.
When he wakes up, he apologizes for falling asleep, and Dr. Robert or Bob blames it on the mountain heat that sometimes gets to people here. And, hey, I'm going to be in Tokyo soon. Maybe I'll look you up when I get down there. Oh, great. Sounds like a plan. Well, when they do meet back up in Tokyo, Larry's already starting to feel a little funny, but the doc wants to make sure that he can keep him under observation and introduces him or reintroduces him to his assistant / secretary / never really clear where he found her, although it's implied that it came from somewhere pretty dark.
Yeah, Tara, the lovely Tara, who seems to be there, not necessarily against her will, but almost it seems like, well, this is a better life than the one I came from. And it almost seems like maybe she was in maybe a brothel or something like that.
That's the vibe I got.
Yeah. So,
that's the vibe I got.
She's the lovely assistant, and she has a bit of a crisis of conscience with what he's doing, and yet she does go along with him, and she does help him entertain Larry.
Entertain Larry, yes, quite entertaining. So Tara's played by Terry Zimmern, and I don't see any other credits for her anywhere, which is too bad because, I mean, she was gorgeous, and I really do like the little journey she goes on in the film. At the very beginning of the movie, she talks about how she learned to not have feelings a long time ago, which, again, kind of implies maybe she did come from a brothel scenario or situation. But as the movie progresses, she does start developing feelings for Larry, even though she knows full well the dude's married and she really shouldn't be pushing. But, you know, she and the doctor have this plan, and...
Yeah. She's playing it. She's doing what she needs to do, but she's also falling for that animal magnetism that Larry apparently does have.
When called on it, because he misses his flight, he doesn't go back to New York when he's supposed to. When called on it, he's talking about how he finally gets to live it up. He finally gets to live for him. He doesn't have to be who everybody wants him to be. He gets to enjoy Tokyo and really just have a good time. And he's looking a little rough. He stays out late with Dr. Bob. Spends a lot of time with the geisha girls. Yeah,
he shows him a good time, and at this point, Larry is starting to the influence of what's happened to him is starting to kind of do a little Jekyll and Hyde number on him.
Yeah, there are a lot of Jekyll and Hydes here.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, a lot of Jekyll and Hyde isms.
And it starts off kind of mild, where I haven't had any fun, blah blah blah. It kind of ramps up with him being really really mean to his poor, loyal, suffering wife.
Right.
It's kind of hard to watch that because I mean she's just such a nice person, and she just so wants them to be like they were, and he's just not having it. The new Larry, this new Larry who has sprung up from whatever depths that the doctor has pulled it out of.
The one time that they interact with each other before all this goes sour, it's a wonderful, loving conversation over the telephone. I have a dinner I have to go to tonight, dear, and I'm just going to imagine that you're there with me. And it's just it's just sweet, you know?
Yeah.
But as things progress and there is definitely a downward cycle that he finds himself in. And on top of all of this, people are starting to die. There's some murders happening in town. Some of them happened to be before Larry got Mickey'd.
Right.
got taken in by the doctor.
Yes. Are we talking about Kingi here?
Yeah.
That was our opening with this kind of idyllic sort of Japanese garden of these pretty girls just, being pretty in a pond, like in a pool, suddenly being basically slaughtered by Sasquatch.
Pretty much. And I was very surprised. I mean, it's 1959, so things are starting to get a little bit more loose in terms of what you can see on screen, but the opening credits are played over a paper door that blood had been splashed all over.
Yeah.
It's pretty gruesome for this era.
It definitely is. It kind of subverts what you're thinking a 1950s movie is going to be. But hey, we had Brain That Wouldn't Die with that thing pulling off that guy's arm in the basement, so...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I guess the gloves are off. So, yeah, there was a pretty gnarly slasher moment right from the get-go. Yes, Kingi is his what we call failed experiment of the Dr. Suzuki's. It turns out it's his brother. He is no longer able to control him. He's going and murdering locals, and he has to gas and then murder him, shoot him, and throw him in the crucible there.
It was pretty brutal. Gas him, shoot him, burn him up. All while the other subject is watching and screaming.
His wife would be, what is her name?
Imiko?
Yeah,
Imiko,
there you go.
right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, screaming bloody murder. So she's obviously coherent enough to understand that Kingi, who is apparently someone she cared about very much, is no more.
And there are some more murders happening now that Larry's starting to go through this transformation. We don't really see the effects or the results of a lot of these murders or the aftermath, I suppose. We hear about it, but we don't get to see it nearly as bloody as we saw at the very beginning of the film. And that's fine. We don't need to have it shoved down our throat. We get what's happening here at this point. And all the while, Larry's just descending further and further, and his hand's starting to bother him. Then he starts getting this weird itch on his shoulder, and he starts grabbing his shoulder, and eventually there's an eye growing out of it.
Yeah.
And I knew it was coming, but, it's still pretty shocking and pretty well done. And I think it's because the actor sells it so well. He's terrified of this thing. He doesn't know what's going on.
He's all in. He's pushing this part, and he is selling what is happening to him. He's selling it big time. Another thing that I thought was very of its time is whenever there was some kind of anything weird about to happen, did you notice what would happen on the soundtrack?
I'd have to go back and watch, I guess.
Well, that would be the theremin.
Oh, that's right. There is some theremin in this.
There's quite a bit.
Yeah. I want to learn how to play it. I want a theremin, and I want to learn how to play it.
Oh, wouldn't it be great?
It would be awesome. I'd have to take lessons somewhere away from the home as to not to drive the cats and my wife crazy, but it would be so fun.
You could probably get some headphones for that, I would imagine.
Oh, man, yeah, we get some of that as well. And eventually, this eye grows into a second head. So we got this guy running around with this head, the second head on his shoulder, and they do a pretty good job. It's not just the guy's head and then a dummy head running around. Every once in a while, they're pretty smart about it, where they swap it to where the quote-unquote normal head is now the dummy head, and the made-up face is the one that's growing out. So it does kind of make it feel a little bit more realistic.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that. And what I love is when they finally separate. That sequence, when they're up in the mountains, that is so well done. So good.
That is insane. I did not expect that to happen. And again, it's one of those kind of really sort of potentially very visceral things for an older movie. And, when it's done, it's not bloody or anything like that. But just the fact that it happens is really one of the highlights of the movie. I can only imagine what they would do with contemporary special effects, but I really like the way it was done in the black and white during the big climax.
It looks great. It feels good. Very well done. They do it kind of sort of behind a tree, but they do it in such a way that it makes it feel even more violent than it's just wonderful. And there's this weird sense of violence through this entire thing, this kind of griminess through the entire film that I think you don't see in a lot of other 50s science fiction horror films that were being produced here in the States. Maybe the fact that it was produced over in Japan and they had a different crew with different skills and a different mindset and a different approach involved added to that, I don't know. But there is this kind of griminess and sliminess to the whole thing that I think works really well for the kind of story the Manster ends up being.
I agree, yeah. A lot of your two-headed monster movies kind of have that also, the credible two-headed transplant. And a lot of these there's something about it that is just, it's so visceral and it's so off-putting and just kind of gruesome. And the head, the way that the head was performed, I mean, there was some articulation in the head. They didn't put floodlights on it, I mean, they kept it kind of in shadows and they kept it kind of moving to where it never really looked particularly phony, and that just added to the effectiveness and this visceral feel that you are referring to.
Yeah, and I like a good two-headed monster movie.
Absolutely.
I like whether it's Ray Milland, whether it's Ray Milland and Rosie Greer or whoever.
Right.
Right, I mean, I like these movies quite a bit, but this one I think is going to make its way to the top of my list when it comes to, kind of judging these films. If I had to make a list of some of my favorites, this one's going to be right there. And I think part of it's because of the head and the monster design, but also the performances. And I really enjoy the way Larry kind of descends into this nearly hedonistic kind of guy who flat out chooses his girlfriend over his wife in front of his wife.
Yeah. That was...
Tara, I don't think we're welcome here anymore. Oh, God. You feel so bad for the wife who, doesn't have a huge character arc. She just wants her man back and her life back, and I get that. But, man, you still feel terrible for her.
I know. Again, she's just so sweet and so forgiving, and she could overlook all of this stuff that he's doing. But she's pretty convinced that this really isn't him, that he's being possessed or influenced somehow. And I think that's probably what's driving her and causing her to pursue this, because it's just not her Larry.
Yeah, that's the out here, is that we know that it's not him. He's under the influence of whatever it is the doctor gave him. He's not himself. So that's the out. That's his way to come back to her, I suppose. And so much so that at the end, when the two bodies split, when there's a good Larry and a bad Larry or whatever, they can point at the Sasquatch-looking version of him and say, yeah, that's the one that did all the killing. It wasn't Larry over here. It's that guy, So, I mean, even have that as kind of an out for him, which I'm grateful for, because in the end, Larry is a good guy. It's not his fault, really.
It's not his fault at all. He was just looking for a story, and he was used for nefarious purposes, and he was the unwilling pawn. It ended up really kind of messing up his life pretty hard. It's the fact that at the end, it looks like, the superintendent, Aida, he says, well, we are going to have to arrest him, but we'll keep everything in mind here. So they kind of left it kind of open as far as, like, there's a good chance Larry might be let off.
They have to be responsible. They have to do their job. But I think we walk away from it feeling like, it's going to be okay.
Absolutely.
Especially since they can find that other body.
Yeah, right. Well, the body went into the volcano, though, didn't it?
Well, that did. I'm referring more to, like, Dr. Bob, who tries to commit harry-carry, and then all this other stuff that's going on, and Larry doesn't have the claws that were used. And anyway,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, the evil Larry, the big hairy thing, it goes off the edge into the volcano.
Yeah, it takes Tara with him, unfortunately. I mean, because she didn't deserve that, but I guess she was living kind of a tortured life, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say why they made that decision. Again,
we never really quite find out for sure what her background was, but whatever it was, what she's doing now is so much better, and the doctor, every once in a while, keeps threatening to send her back to it. So, there's that kind of hanging over her head, and she's falling in love with this guy, even though she knows she probably shouldn't be, and yeah.
She was a tragic figure, and I guess there's two kinds of stories. There's comedy and tragedy, and this is a tragedy, but it's a darn entertaining one.
It really is. It really is. When we first started talking about this a year ago,
yes.
Why is it you wanted to do this film? Was there just you wanted to revisit it, or did you have a special connection to it?
Actually, I posted it in your Facebook group, and you
and I reached out to you.
You hit me up with that. Yeah, you want to talk about it? That's actually how it happened. Yeah, it wasn't actually my idea, but I'm glad I did, because it's kind of nice when you can kind of like discover something later and look at it with adult eyes, and because a lot of times you see things through rose-colored nostalgia glasses, and you're not necessarily the best judge of how good it is or isn't. In this case, I think it worked out well, because we were able to have this discussion for this thing as it is, and not as we necessarily perceive it.
Sure. If people haven't seen this film, and I know we spoiled it, we always spoil the movies here on Monster Kid Radio now, but if people haven't seen the film, if you were trying to introduce them to it, would you give them any kind of a heads up about what they're going to see, or try to adjust their mindset so they can accept the film for what it is, or just let them go in cold?
Well, the person has to know that this is a 1950s monster sci-fi thing, and you've got to take all the things that go with that into consideration. But going with that, I would say, it's a really good, clever, kind of Jekyll and Hyde, kind of Wolfman, one man's insane journey into the dark side of himself. Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely recommend this to anyone who likes classic monster movies.
It was co-directed. The co-directors are George P. Breakston, who directed a handful of other things, but he was also primarily an actor. And then Kenneth G. Crane was the other co-director on the project, who co-directed, or who did direct, the half-human U.S. sequences for that film, as well as the movie Monster from Marine Hell. I don't know much about the directors other than what I can find online about them. Apparently, George P. Breakston was an actor in the 1935 film Life Returns, which is something that a friend of mine and I have been talking about a lot lately. I haven't seen it yet, but I keep meaning to. It's supposed to be a weird horror film from the 30s.
That could be one of your future episodes. Yeah.
Hey, there you go.
You guys definitely hit some of the deep cuts on your show. You don't go just for obvious stuff. It's great that you're opening people up to things that they might not otherwise know about.
Well, part of the reason is we're starting to run out of the mainstays. They don't make 1950s monster movies anymore, so we can only have so many we can do.
It's true. It is finite, but it is a lot deeper than you might think, and than most people might think.
Sure.
But the Manster, it's a relatively obscure film. I think most people probably aren't that terribly familiar with it, and but they should be.
I think so too. The movie also had the title The Split, which is a great alternate title. I mean, pretty obvious. I think I like Manster better, just to play on the word monster.
I mean, I understand why it's called that, but that sounds like it could be like a caper movie or a crime movie, or I don't know. That doesn't just doesn't give me the monster stuff that the Manster does. One of the things I meant to touch on was that they it's something that kind of flew in the face of the norm back then, was that they didn't film day for night. Like all of the nighttime nocturnal pursuit sequences, of which there were quite a few towards the end of the movie, were all filmed at night, whether it was in a graveyard or a shipyard or in the streets, whatever. It looked very authentic. There's a lot of these old movies you have to really swallow a lot to say, wow, this must be the brightest moon ever, because you can read by the light of this dark, stormy night, whatever. But they filmed night for night. It was really refreshing for, again, a movie, a kind of a B movie of that era, because that just isn't something that they would normally do.
Yeah, I do like the way it looks. It does have a very interesting feel. I love so many of the locations. Tara's home, I really liked. What we saw at the very beginning with the springs and everything, and the public baths. I love that moment, that sequence as well, where they do bathe in the same room, but there is a divider between them, and he's talking to her, and I wish I could see you. It's like, yeah, I bet you do, buddy. So do we.
Absolutely. Another one of the sets that I really liked was Dr. Suzuki's lair. Basically, like in his front yard, you could see straight through to what turns out was an active volcano in the background. And what we're looking at here, it's a set. It's an indoor set. And again, it doesn't necessarily look realistic, but it looks really cool. It's like kind of like those old Star Treks where you would, they'd be on some planet, and they're obviously on a stage. But you know what? It looks so great that you're just, it's like, yeah, no, this is it. This is a fantasy film, and I'm digging it.
Yeah.
So when that volcano goes off for the conclusion, oh boy, it does pay off.
It's Chekhov's volcano.
There you go.
We know it's going to go off. You just called it a lair. That is so much better than saying it's a laboratory, because that's really what it feels like, is this lair that he's got built here with cages for his failed experiments. And yeah, it really does have that kind of evil lair vibe.
Oh, it's a great laboratory. He goes downstairs and there's like these big mutant plants and these giant mushrooms and these, of course, every Frankenstein lab pulsating light thing going on. It's a great kind of dungeon lab set that he's got going on there.
Oh yeah, it's really, really good. I liked it a lot. Yeah, that lair setup was great. And even to get into it, it's not just, you open up a door and go down some stairs. You have to unlock the door that's set inside some rocks, in a rock wall.
Oh yeah.
To get to. Even that gives it this kind of cool vibe that is pretty unique to this film. I know I'm going to go back and watch this film again, partly because I can't believe I didn't really pick up on the theremin as quickly as you did.
Oh, it's there.
And I need to correct that. But, I want to watch it for more than just that. I want to see more of the set design and the production design. Unfortunately, because the movie's in the public domain, everybody's got it, but not a lot of people have a lot of information about it. It's one of these movies that kind of came out and just did its thing, and that's it. I'd love to learn more about it.
It's kind of a bit of a lost film. It is a shame, but it's
a little bit, yeah.
But it's fun to mine these things every now and again.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And another thing I wanted to touch on with the lair set, it's a pretty sophisticated facility there, but in order to get there, you have to hike up rocks and not even through trails. You have to actually, like Larry says, make like a mountain goat to actually get there. So it's amazing that he was able to have had that place built, considering there was no road going to it.
And I do remember him saying that, especially towards the end when they're talking about using the telephone.
Yeah.
Because if it's really that remote, I'm glad they do have a phone, but okay.
Yeah, well, again, that's some of those things you have to just kind of like go with.
Yeah, you have to just accept. Yeah, it is what it is. I love that, too, that it's so remote that it takes a long time to get there. It's hard to get to. This film delivers on so many different levels. And I'm so glad we did it. I don't know if it was worth waiting a year.
Well.
Next time, let's not.
I was doing other things in the meantime. Don't worry, Derek. I was busying myself, and I'm sure you were too. So
you weren't sitting around pining for Monster Kid Radio to give you that call.
Just staring at my phone. When's he gonna call?
Why hasn't he called yet?
Wow. No,
okay.
But I did like at the time. I did cram it a few times last year when I thought it was going to happen, and then obviously these things happen in your life where you weren't able to do it. So, but then I was able to watch it a couple more times recently, and I got no regrets. It's a really fun movie. But like you say, you have to go back. Oh darn, I have to watch this. Great old movie again. So,
right?
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Well, I know I'll be watching this again because it was a lot of fun. And you know what? I'd love to have you back on the show again, but let's not wait a year.
Okay, sure. Yeah. That'd be amazing, Derek.
moremonsters.wixsite.com, and more is spelled Moore, and then monsters.wixsite.com. Link in the show notes, of course. Go check out Jim's work and let him know that you heard him here on the podcast. Jim, thanks for your patience and your graciousness in finally coming on the show after a year of talking about getting you on to talk about the Manster. And I couldn't think of a better movie to introduce you to the listeners of Monster Kid Radio. The Manster's really, really cool. But what I want to ask you, sir, is have you ever considered making a tiki version of the Manster? I'd like to see that. That'd be a lot of fun. Listeners, if you're going to be at Son of Monsterpalooza in Burbank, make sure you track down Jim and maybe pick up an item or two from his table. Let him know that Monster Kid Radio says hi. In fact, earlier in the show, when Karen called in to let us know how NecronomiCon went, if you're going to be at Son of Monsterpalooza, I'd love to hear how it goes. Give us a call. We'd love a con report. That's something that we don't do enough of here on Monster Kid Radio. Well, Monster Bash is the Monster Kid convention to go to. There are so many other conventions going on around the country that might have some Monster Kid content, like NecronomiCon, like Son of Monsterpalooza, like the upcoming H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival and CthulhuCon with special guests Victoria Price and Roger freaking Corman. Anyway, if you are going to be at a convention, call in. Let us know how it went. Or if you want to record an MP3 and send it to us by email, that'd be great too. I'll include the contact information at the end of the show.
Trapped. Trapped. Trapped.
They're traps in a whirlpool of shrieking fear from the most fiendish idea ever conceived by the human brain.
The Brainiac.
And it has a friend. She was beautiful, desirable, and not altogether human.
The curse of the crying women.
Together they will trap you in a whirlpool of horror. But if you live through it, you will never forget.
The Brainiac and the curse of the crying women.
It is 1976. The American merchant vessel Petrox Explorer has just set sail from the port of Surabaya in search of oil. What they find will shock the world.
We may be sailing into the history books.
She's alive!
Maybe my luck has changed.
They will discover an uncharted island that is the home of the most incredible creature on the face of the earth. A creature called Kong. Dino De Laurentiis presents the most exciting original motion picture event of all time. King Kong.
If you rebuild it, they will come.
They burned it down. If you rebuild it, they will come.
You didn't hear them? Beg your pardon? The voices? People?
If you rebuild it, they will come. They blew it up.
If you rebuild it, they will come. They demolished it.
If you rebuild it, they will come.
But horror has a permanent address.
Welcome to my home.
The House of Frankenstein lives.
You see, we began a project a few years ago, but unfortunately it was interrupted, and we're most anxious to take it up again.
In September and October, the Fire and Water Podcast Network presents a Supermates tradition, covering 4 classic horror films and 4 related comic book adventures.
I must find more victims before my work is done.
You need look no further, Vampirus. We'll take the Bat-Jet to the Hall of Justice and transform the other Super Friends.
Featuring an all-star cast.
James Spader.
Are you crazy?
Jack Nicholson.
No, just marking my territory.
Anthony Hopkins.
She lives beyond the grace of God, a wanderer in the outer darkness.
Lon Chaney Jr.
One becomes accustomed to the darkness here.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
You're afraid that when it gets dark, you'll attack me.
Vincent Price.
Let's see what the rest of this mausoleum looks like.
Gary Oldman.
And there's really of your own will and leave some of the happiness you bring.
Winona Ryder.
I almost feel pity for anything so hunted as this count.
Peter Cushing.
I am a doctor of medicine, law, and physics. To the best of my knowledge, doctorates are not awarded for witchcraft. But if ever they are, no doubt I shall qualify for one.
And Keanu Reeves.
Doctor!
This Halloween, visit our Field of Screams at the scenic House of Frankenstein, where terror is only a listen away.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Monster Kid Radio. I had a blast putting this episode together. I hope you had a blast listening to it. The voicemails, the conversation about the Manster Kenny segment. Kenny is just knocking it out of the park. And, you know, I'm incredibly lucky to have surrounded myself with so many, not just cyber friends, but actual friends, people that I know that I can call if I need to or reach out to or whatever, and talk monsters or anything else with. So thank you for making Monster Kid Radio special for me. I hope I'm doing a little bit to make it special for you. If you have any questions about Monster Kid Radio, want to know anything about it, or just want to learn more about anything that you've heard about on this episode of the show, head over to monsterkidradio.net, where you'll find links to everything that we've talked about in the show notes. You can also find a link to our Facebook page, our Facebook group, and our Twitter. And I do try to be a little bit more active on Twitter than I have been in the past, so you can follow me there as well. And then, of course, I mentioned the YouTube channel. Head over there if you want to know what's coming up next week. You'll have to play the YouTube video that I uploaded earlier this week to find out what's happening next week, and I think you're going to like it. So, yeah, you know what to do. Our contact information: email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or call and leave us a voicemail at 503-479-5657. That's 503-479-5MKR. If you look in the show notes, you'll find a few links going to Amazon. This is where you're going to be able to pick up items that you hear about here on the show, including, well, my book as well. But anything that you hear about here on Monster Kid Radio, if you follow the Amazon links that you can find throughout the website to buy them yourself, we're an affiliate. We get a little bit of a kickback. And just because I do have the Godzilla Criterion release that's coming out later this year listed as well. So if you're going to pick that up through Amazon, as of right now, it's running about $165 on Blu-ray. Well, you know, pick it up through the link and we get a little bit of support from Amazon. Every little bit helps. There was no bedtime story from Professor Frenzy this week. You want to know why? Well, he was off at a convention. Go back a little bit and listen to my comments about what you can do if you're at a convention and you think there's something Monster Kid Radio might want to hear about. But yeah, he was at a convention last week, but he'll be back soon. At least, I hope he will. I miss him. I need my bedtime stories. I also need my surf music, so I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit more of the Intoxicos as I wrap up and remind you that Monster Kid Radio is a registered service mark of Monster Kid Radio LLC. All original content of Monster Kid Radio by Monster Kid Radio LLC is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 unported license. Of course, that doesn't apply to the song Paradise Simulation. That belongs to the band The Intoxicos, which is that really cool surf band whose album End Times you can pick up by going to intoxicos.bandcamp.com. Check out the entire album. Pay special attention to Paradise Simulation. Whatever you do, let them know that you heard about them here on Monster Kid Radio. My name's Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.